explanation for all of this. Let's go right off the top. I have set aside a lot of time to dive into this. So put your feet up, folks. This is going to get interesting. Canty, I'll give you the first thought. First big picture takeaway, because you weren't with us yesterday, from a moment in time in which the D in Big D stands for drama.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones went out and got Trey Lance as a long-term hedge against Dak Prescott, either flopping in the postseason once again or asking for too much money in a contract extension. I don't think that this is a situation where Trey figures into the equation for the 2023 season. Cooper Rush is firmly entrenched as the backup on that team, but I do think Trey Lance can be a bridge if the Cowboys need to transition away from Dak Prescott beyond 2023. I think the reality is that the head coach and the quarterback are both on notice this season, and Jerry Jones is running out of patience with both parties. We can't blame the supporting cast when it comes to why Dak can't have success. He's got a good offensive line, he's got great skill position players, and he's got a championship caliber defense. If he can't get it done in the second season, at some point, you have to acknowledge that the player just is who he is and think about moving on to another option. The only problem with that is Dak is a top 10 to 12 player at the quarterback spot, and it's going to be hard to replace that kind of talent.
I think that's a fascinating way to look at it, because they already did the one thing they could do without doing either of those, and that's firing the offensive coordinator. A guy who was very highly regarded around the league in Kellen Moore, who put together an offense that racked up a ton of yards and a ton of points. But they fired him, and they handed it to Mike McCarthy and to Dak. So clearly, there's no one else to blame besides those two if it doesn't work out well. Dan, take us inside.
Yeah, look, the Cowboys have for years talked about wishing they could draft a developmental quarterback prospect with one of their middle round picks. They haven't been able to match it up in the draft. This is them doing that. Trey Lance is 23. Like, he's still very young. He's still a developmental prospect. McCarthy was talking yesterday about how they're going to put him in the practices that the young guys and the rookies do, and the extra meetings that those guys do. So they're treating him as if they just drafted him. They drafted him with next year's fourth-round pick, completely worthwhile chance to take. I think if Trey Lance were going to be able to help someone this year, the 49ers wouldn't have traded him to a team they might have to face in the playoffs.
Right.
Like that's not, so the Cowboys are thinking 2024 and or beyond with Trey Lance. But to Canty's point, Dak Prescott did give them a hard time in extension talks a couple of years ago, right? The Cowboys' plan and hope is that Dak Prescott signs an extension next offseason and stays their quarterback for the next, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. But they also know that plans go off the rails. Dak Prescott's career is a testament to this. Tony Romo was the quarterback when they drafted Dak in the fourth round, and then he got hurt and then retired, so now Dak becomes a starter. So they're aware. It's just a hedge. It's a smart business move.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Can I push back on one piece of it?
Yeah.
Because when you draft a developmental quarterback in the fourth round, he is precisely that. He wasn't once the third pick in the draft. It changes the dynamic when you recognize this was a person who many teams, not just the 49ers, but many teams in the NFL thought not that long ago could become a pro football superstar.
Right, and he has more than $4 million coming next year, which is not what a salary that a developmental quarterback would be making in his second year with the team. There are aspects of it that are different from that. But from the Cowboys' standpoint, they're saying we spent a fourth-round pick to get a guy that might have first-round upside at the most important position. Even if Dak wins the next 3 Super Bowls and extends his contract 20 years, Trey Lance is somebody who could develop and become a trade chip for them. There's all kinds of ways this could play out.
I don't know how he develops. I keep hearing that. I don't know how he develops without playing, though. If the idea is that he's never going to be on the field, then I don't know how he develops.
Geno Smith did it.
Well, yeah, because he got a chance to play. My point is Geno Smith got on the field
in the background.
and he played.
Yeah.
He was also a high pick once upon a time. I hear what you're saying. Let me throw this one over to you, Mike T, because you've been in the middle of all of these. You actually made an interesting point when we were talking about this on our call this morning, that the general manager's job is to sit between the owner and the coach and make sure that everyone is happy. But in Dallas, no one sits in that chair because Jerry Jones is occupying two of the 3, and some might argue all 3. So if you're Mike McCarthy and this trade takes place and you didn't know about it, what's your reaction?
It's ominous because I am the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, and this is going to impact the quarterback position. I'm an offensive coach, as you allude to. We fired Kellen Moore, and you're making this move without me. I'm going home at night thinking like, well, my days are numbered here. The fact that they didn't bring him in and say strategically, does he beat out Will Grier? Is he better than Cooper Rush? When does that happen? I would be, if I'm Mike McCarthy, I would really take exception to that because obviously he signed off on the talent, which you allude to. So do most people. It's a no-brainer to do it for a fourth-round pick. But the process of not involving him in the strategy of acquiring him would be really weird.
He did say in that quote, though, I was involved in the evaluation and then not in the ultimate, like the deal. So it sounds like they at least went to McCarthy at some point and said, hey, if we did this, what would you think? Right? I mean, like we can read that in.
Well, that's, it's interesting because I wasn't on the conference call, but I wanted to shout out, do you mean the evaluation when he was coming out in the draft, or do you mean now? Because that just happened. It was 2 years ago, and he was the coach of the Cowboys then.
Yeah, the other part of the body language, Greeny, that really bothered me was Dak Prescott, and Dan alluded to it. I wonder in the back of his mind, he's saying like, well, I was this nondescript fourth-round pick. We had a star quarterback in Tony Romo, and we know the rest is history. And I wonder in the back of his mind, he's thinking like, well, maybe my tenure here is a little bit shorter than I thought. When he makes that comment of nothing surprises me anymore, I find that to be a little passive aggressive. Like if you're the starting quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, just sit there and say, hey man, this is my team. They can bring in 42 backup quarterbacks the way Green Bay did when Brett Favre was there. And he didn't say that. And to me, he was wobbly there unnecessarily.
So part of the issue there, and talking to people in the building, and Dak alluded to this too, that one of the backups, Will Greer, is a very good friend of Dak's, and Dak felt like he deserved a shot to be on the team, and now he's thinking, well, he's not going to be because we just got this other guy. So he's annoyed about sort of what this impact is on his friend, so that's part of it too. But to the bigger picture, right? Like, extension time comes. Do the Cowboys want to keep Dak? Yes. Does Dak want to stay in Dallas? I mean, like, if bad things happen between player and team, that can have an effect.
So this is a lot about the future. It is not about 2023, but 2024 is going to get here really soon, and a lot of things could change.
And Dak Prescott on notice in Dallas. But that's not new news, though. I mean, we all knew that coming into the season. When Mike McCarthy scapegoated Kellen Moore, the clock started on him. When Dak Prescott flopped in back-to-back playoff appearances against the San Francisco 49ers, the clock started on him. Not to mention the $60 million cap hit in 2024 on his contract. They're going to have to make a consequential decision on Dak Prescott this year. If he's going to be the guy, they're going to give him a $250 million extension. We see where the quarterback contracts are going with Herbert, Lamar, and Jalen Hurts. We know what the price is going to be. Right now, Dak is at $40 million a year. You're going to have to pay him upwards of $53 million a year if he's going to continue to be your quarterback. That's awfully rich, considering that this guy has had a lot of chances to get you to the championship rounds in the postseason and has never done it. Same thing with Mike McCarthy. Playoffs is not enough. They both need to go on a deep playoff run. Otherwise, we could be talking about a new head coach quarterback combination in Dallas in 2024.
Yeah, Greedy, I think that's a really important point that Chris is making, which is if you're running the Cowboys and you're saying, well, we could pay Dak $50 million a year, or we have Trey Lance for $6 million over 2. I'm a huge Trey Lance fan. Is there a $47 million a year difference? We know we got to take care of Micah Parsons. We know CeeDee Lamb. Like, there's a lot of good young players. And one of your calculations is, yeah, I'd rather have Dak Prescott over Trey Lance, but is he $47 million dollars a year better?
So the only thing Chris Canty said that I disagree with, and Graziano, I turn to you on this, is that everybody knew Dak was on notice going into this year. I think everybody knew Mike McCarthy was on notice going into this year. And I think the Cowboys continuously say, Dak is our guy, we want to get a new deal done. But I've heard them say that a lot, and it doesn't ever seem to happen. So the idea that there could be, the reality that this could be something different than Dak is the quarterback for the next 10 years in Dallas, I don't think that's commonly thought.
It gives them a potential option.
Right.
Trey Lance might never be anything.
Right.
They might have been wrong about him in San Francisco when they moved up to take him 3rd overall. That happens all the time. So, but if he is something, and there is an issue with the Dak contract, I mean, you say they always talk about extending him, and it never seems to happen. It happened like 2 or 3 years ago.
I know, but he had to play on a franchise tag, which quarterbacks never do.
But that is not necessarily the result of a team's decision, right? There's 2 parties in the negotiation. Dak Prescott may be the one that gave them a harder time than they gave him. So you have to remember that too, and that could happen again. And the possibility that that happens again means you have to guard against it. Like you don't know what's going to happen. And they like Dak Prescott. I was texting with Cowboys people on Friday night after the deal went down.
Tell me.
And I said, we're going to be talking about this on the show next week and what impact it has on Dak. And they said, no way, this has nothing to do with Dak. We're just getting a talent, 23 years old, whatever. So I'm going to text him back and say, I know my guy Greeny, and I was right.
But here's the thing. But Dan, tell them Greeny said that makes no sense. All right, there's only one way that Trey Lance ever increases his own value, and that is to play.
Right.
He will never be worth more than a fourth. He was the third pick in the draft 2 years ago. They got him for a fourth-round pick. Why? Because he's never played. If he doesn't play this year at all, then he will not be worth more than that a year from now.
2012, the Washington, they're now the Commanders, draft Robert Griffin III, our friend and colleague, with the second overall pick. And then in the fourth round, they draft Kirk Cousins.
Right.
And Kyle Shanahan, the offensive coordinator, calls Kirk Cousins and congratulates him on being drafted and basically tells him, we hope you never play for us.
Understood.
Because they had just spent all that draft capital on RG3. So, but obviously things changed, right? So, I mean, help me out. Like, you ran teams. Like, you have to ensure against
I think
calamity.
The best example of that was Green Bay for all those years, whether it was Matt Hasselbeck, Mark Brunell, Aaron Brooks, one after. So I think it's good business, but I do think more fundamentally where Dak Prescott has to play well, Greeny, because if not, he's not going to be worth $50 million a year. And Trey Lance is, to me, has great upside. So it was a smart strategic move by the Cowboys.
Let me push back on Graziano here, though. They already have that guy. He's Cooper Rush. Cooper Rush, he did a backup quarterback's job. Last year, the quarterback got hurt.
Yeah.
He's as old as he needs. A backup quarterback is someone who needs to come in and play 4 games and win you 2 or 3 of them. That's exactly what Cooper Rush did.
We're not talking
That's not
about
what Trey Lance
We're
is.
talking about options at the position long term.
Which you don't need if you have the answer long
Dak
term.
Prescott gets sick of playing football and retires next year. I mean, like there's all kinds of things that could happen.
But
Cooper Rush is not going to be your long-term starter. Trey Lance may have the talent to be that.
I understand that, but the Chargers aren't doing that with Justin Herbert, and the Bengals aren't doing that with Joe Burrow, and all these teams aren't doing it. If you believe you have your quarterback for the next 10 years, all you need is a backup.
Some teams do it.
Canty's got his hand in the air.
I was talking about the Packers.
It's very polite of him to do this. I think we should call on him. Mr. Canty, go.
No, here's the thing, Greeny. I think one of the things we're glossing over is the fact that Dak has had issues over the past couple of seasons. This is a guy that's missed 17 games over the last 3 years, and in his last 31 games has had 35 turnovers. So things haven't been necessarily trending in the right direction as far as his individual production. Now, what has saved him is the supporting cast in a defense that's led the league in takeaways in back-to-back years. But Dak's individual production is something that needs to improve if the Cowboys are going to make the financial commitment that he's going to be looking for in a new contract extension. So that is all a part of the math when it comes down to why the Dallas Cowboys made the move. And again, I don't think Trey Lance is going to develop into the future face of the franchise for the Cowboys, but I do think Trey Lance represents a lot of upside as a bridge from Dak Prescott to whatever the Cowboys are going to do long-term at the position beyond 2023.
Greeny, there's one other fundamental point here. 4 quarterbacks played in 17 games last year. Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, and Tom Brady. Trey Lance is a better football player than Cooper Rush and Will Grier. You got better as a team, and it's likely, for whatever reason, injury or otherwise, that Dak Prescott won't play in 17 games.
Yeah, look, in terms of Dak Prescott, right, like they believe that he's the answer long term, but they understand that plans can change. It's pretty much that simple. You're just guarding against worst case scenarios here, and you don't even know if Trey Lance is going to be that guard. Look, the example is Russell Wilson. 3 years ago, if I had told you Seattle will not be extending Russell Wilson when his contract is up, you would have said I was nuts.
Right.
And they didn't. They traded him to the Denver Broncos because they got to the point where, like, he's going to want $50+ million a year. We don't think he's that player anymore.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.